in different kinds of situations. Okay, a lot of times what is said is or what is written is equal to what is meant, like this. But in like other situations, what is said is not necessarily what is meant. Okay, so we'll look at different types of meaning in order to understand meaning. Okay. So we'll pay attention to three kinds of meaning in particular: entailment, presupposition, and implicature. Okay, and last week we looked at this already. That a lot of times, this is the point that you should keep in mind, that a lot of times meaning is not what is said or what is written. As in this example, have you eaten? I have class in 10 minutes. So have you eaten here is not necessarily asking for information about whether or not that person has already eaten a meal, right? But it's kind of an invitation to eat together, for example, right? So that is not what is said, right? But it's what is intended or what is meant. And then I have class in 10 minutes. That's actually essentially a refusal, right? And so on. So that we looked at that last time. So you can see that in that conversation, there's a lot that has been implied in that particular situation. So we'll study what we call implications or implied message in text, right? And when we look closely, there are three types of implications that we can study. And the first type of implication that we'll study today and we'll focus on today is what we call entailment, right? So entailment comes from the verb to entail, right? Entail means to include. So if A entails B, it means A includes B, A involves B, for example. Okay? Entailment is a very, very special kind of implication because it's a very strong kind of implication, the strongest. And you cannot mistake entailment. Okay? And mostly it has to do with sentence meaning, actually the dictionary meaning or what the sentence says. Okay? So this is very strong. You don't have to guess about the intention of the speaker or the intention of the writer, because the relationship between one statement and another statement is very strong, and you cannot mistake that relationship. And the definition of entailment is if you have two sentences and one sentence is, I can call P. Okay? If you have two sentences or more, actually, let's start with two. If you have two sentences, and let's name the first one P, sentence P. And the second sentence, we name it Q. Okay? So we say that P entails Q. And I will use this kind of symbol, like an arrow, like that. It means P entails Q. Okay? P entails Q when Q logically follows from P. Okay? When Q logically follows from P. In other words, when P is true, Q has to always be true. Always. Because it follows logically from P, right? So if in all situations that P is true, Q must be true. So that relationship is very strong, right? Because if P is true, Q has to always be true too. Okay? If Q is false, if for some reason, okay, Q is false, then that's not an entailment. Okay? There's no entailing relationship there because it has to be, Q has to be true. Okay? And we look at several, maybe 5 or 6 examples of entailment last time. Before I remind you of one of those sentences, keep in mind that entailment is the property of two sentences, okay? Meaning that it's not what a person thinks or it's not what a person has in mind, but it's a relationship between P and Q. So the relationship is kind of contained between P and Q and not the outside world. It's only the relationship between two texts only, okay? Not in your thought, not anything else. It's relationship between two sentences in written text or in spoken text only. It doesn't have to do with what a person imagines or what a person intends, no. But it's a relationship between two sentences, okay? And last time we looked at maybe many examples, but I'll just bring up one example to remind you. This is a good example. Jeha passionately, you remember that example, kissed his girlfriend. And we don't care whether this is true outside of this world, okay? Outside of the world of this classroom, whether it's true or not, but let's assume that it's true for the purpose of studying here. And Jeha kissed his girlfriend. Does P entail Q or not? Well, we said that P entails Q. When? When in every situation that P is true, Q has to always be true, right? So when Jeha passionately kissed his girlfriend and we take it that is true. Jeha did passionately kiss his girlfriend, right? So is it always true that Jeha kissed his girlfriend? If he passionately kissed her, then is it true that he must have kissed her? Yes, right? So if he passionately kissed her, then in all situations that's true, then he has to kiss his girlfriend for sure, right? So in this case, we say that P entails Q, like that, okay? And we also look at these things, okay? But I will rely on this example now. Let's see what happens. So if I have P and Q here, so entailment happens when P is true, Q is always true too, right? So that's entailment. If P is true, Q is true. So that's entailment right there. Okay? So that's entailment. If P is true, if we are sure that Jeha passionately kissed his girlfriend, then it's sure that he must have kissed his girlfriend for sure. Whether it's passionately or not, we don't care because this only says about the fact that he kissed. Okay? Now, what if I do something to Q? What if I do something to Q? Or maybe no. What if I do something to P? First, we say that P is true, right? What if P is false? Now, I just say Jeha did not, okay, did not, I falsify it. Jeha did not kiss his girlfriend, did not passionately kiss his girlfriend. Now, what about Q? Is it true or false? Jeha didn't passionately kiss his girlfriend. Does it mean he kissed or not kissed? Jeha didn't passionately kiss his girlfriend. He didn't passionately kiss her. So he kissed or not kissed? Who knows, right? It could be both. So if we falsify this, P, it could be true or false. And that's not entailment. Because when you say Jeha didn't passionately kiss his girlfriend, it could mean that he didn't passionately kiss his girlfriend, he just kissed without passion. It could be that. Or he didn't kiss at all. It could mean that too. So when you falsify the P, the relationship change, right? The Q could be true or false. We cannot tell. But entailment is only here. So this is not entailment. Okay? Now, what about, now we do something to the P, right? Now let's do something to the Q. Now, if I falsify Q, let's say Jeha didn't kiss. Okay? So that's our P. Jeha didn't kiss his girlfriend. What about P? Is it true or false? Jeha didn't kiss his girlfriend. could it entail that Jae-ha passionately kissed his girlfriend? If Jae-ha didn't kiss at all, then it's not possible, right, for him to passionately kiss her, right? So if you falsify this, then P will be false too. Okay? So that's a logical relationship. Finally, let's work backward. Meaning, if Q is true, if Jae-ha kissed his girlfriend, okay, does it mean that he kissed her passionately? If he kissed her at all, does it necessarily mean that Jae-ha passionately kissed her? No, right? If this is true, Jae-ha kissed his girlfriend, right? It's true. Let's take it that's true. It doesn't necessarily mean that he passionately kissed her. He could just kiss without passion. Just do it like that, right? So when that Q, when you focus on the Q, and when Q is true, it could be true or false. So that's kind of what we call the truth condition. This is logic, right? Truth condition between different sentences, right? Especially the entailment. But when we talk about entailment, we only talk about here. So if P is true, then Q must be true. In other situations, we can or cannot predict the outcome. But in this situation, you perhaps can, only that. But this is not entailment. This is entailment, but on the reverse side. Okay? When we look at entailment, so that's the truth table here. Okay? So we work from one example, which is a clear example to perhaps most of you here. Maybe it has to do with reality, but it's an easy to see example. When we focus on entailment, we focus on this. Okay? We focus on that only. So we only care about when P is true, Q has to always be true. Now, when you want to test the relationship between two sentences, whether there is an entailment between the two sentences or not, you can use this test. We call it redundancy test. Okay? Redundancy test. Redundancy test has to do with the fact that if two sentences have the entailing relationship, if P entails Q, right? The entailment means that Q logically follow, right? Logically follows from P, right? That's the meaning of entailment when P is true. That's the meaning of entailment. Now, the redundancy test comes in because if you say P, right, you don't need to say Q, right? Because Q is already part of P, in other words. So if you say Q again, if you repeat Q, right, it will be redundant, okay? So entailment is a relationship that is sort of redundant, okay? Because Q is always part of P, right? Q necessarily follows from P, right? So Q, in other words, Q is sort of redundant. It's redundant because it's always true, because it's part of P, like that, okay? So we can use redundancy test to test whether two sentences are in an entailing relationship or not. So if you can use in fact, step one is to use in fact or not only that. If it sounds okay, meaning if they don't sound redundant, if after you join them, they don't sound redundant, then there is no entailment, right? Because entailment means it must be redundant. But if you use in fact or not only that to join them, and you don't perceive any redundancy, it sounds okay, sound perfectly okay, then it's no entailment because it's not redundant, so it's no entailment. If it sounds weird, now you have to double check. Go to step two, use but, okay? But is also a contrastive marker. If it doesn't sound weird, then no entailment because entailment, again, has to do with the redundancy, right? And if it sounds weird, then it's an entailment, okay? So you can test this. Just use this example. Now, just join these two sentences with in fact. Or not only that. And you will find that, do you think that it sounds weird, it sounds redundant or not? Jae-ha passionately kissed his girlfriend. In fact, he kissed his girlfriend. Sound redundant, right? Jae-ha passionately kissed his girlfriend. Not only that, not only passionately kissed, he kissed. Sounds pretty weird, right? Redundant. So go to step 2, okay? Double check. Jae-ha passionately kissed his girlfriend, but Jae-ha kissed his girlfriend. Sound very weird. So can we say that it's an entailment? Yes, right? So this is easy, right? So you can use this redundancy test to check the relationship between two sentences. Can you check this one? The gunman. The gunman assassinated the emperor. And in fact, the emperor died. That sounds weird, right? Very weird. Because assassinated already means to kill secretly, like a celebrity, and then to make him dead. So, or the gunman assassinated the emperor, but the emperor died. That sounds weird. So it's an entailment, right? What about the Jaewon example? You haven't met my brother, he said. Does it entail Jaewon has a brother? Does it entail that or not? Entail or not entail? Can you use the test? I'll give you 2 minutes just to use the test to apply to this example. So, entail or not entail? No, it doesn't. Because you haven't met my brother doesn't necessarily mean that he must have a brother, right? You haven't met because he doesn't have one. Can we read that? You haven't met my brother. In fact, Jaewon doesn't have a brother. Can you do that? In fact, Jaewon has a brother, right? Because you haven't met, because he could have it and you haven't met, or he could not have one. He doesn't have one and you haven't met. So it's not always true. It's not always true that he must have a brother when you haven't met his brother. Maybe he has one, you haven't met, but maybe he doesn't have one. And in both cases, you haven't met, right? So it doesn't entail it, okay? Okay, so that's entailment. So entailment, again, is the relationship when P is always true, when a sentence is always true. When a sentence is true, the following sentence must always be true. Now, let's focus on number 2. I want to start out with number 2 rather than number 1, because number 1 contains the word no. Okay, so we'll start out with number 2. So number 2, we'll check whether in each question the two sentences are in an entailing relationship or not. For example, in 2A, we have every student came to class, and every student came to class and had a good time. So let's suppose that the first sentence is P and the second sentence is Q for all of these. Okay? So P is every student came to class, and Q is every student came to class and had a good time. So does P entail Q or not? So you have to use if you cannot use your imagination for some reason, like in every conceivable, well, maybe I should back up just a bit. So you could use the test of redundancy, right? Use the but test. You have the test on the top of the handout there, right? Use in fact first, and then use but to double check, okay? And if both sounds weird, then you don't have, then you have an entailment. If they don't sound weird, then you don't have an entailment, because entailment is the relationship that indicates redundancy, okay? Or if you don't want to use that test, use your imagination. I have that imagination there. In every conceivable situation in which it's true that P, then it must be true that Q, like that. You could use that too. And you just have to find exceptions, right? If you cannot find exceptions, then it's an entailment sort of thing. So here, every student came to class. Does it entail? Does it mean that every student came to class and had a good time? No, right? They came to class, but they didn't necessarily have to have a good time. So no entailment there. So P doesn't entail Q, okay? For the first one, for 2A, like that. What about the reverse? Does Q entail P or not? Every student came to class and had a good time. Does it entail every student came to class? Yes, right? Because if you test it, every student came to class and had a good time. In fact, every student came to class. That sounds really weird, right? And then you can use but, and it sounds weird. So Q entail P in this case. So you can see that entailment is not two-way, right? It's not two-way. So one can entail the other, but it's not like reciprocal. It's not mutual. What about number 2? Every student is 30 years, over 30 years. Does it entail every student is over 35 years? Yes or no? In every situation, in every conceivable situation in which it's true that every student is over 30 years, does it mean that every student has to be over 35? No, right? And you can use in fact test there. Every student is over 30 years. In fact, everyone is over 35 years. That sounds perfectly okay, like kind of correcting the mistake, right? So that sounds perfectly okay, not contradictory, not redundant. So in this case, it's not an entailment. So P doesn't entail Q there. Okay, but the reverse is true. What about number C, 2C? More than 5 students came to class. Does it mean that more than 5 students came to class and were happy? In every conceivable situation where more than 5 students came to class, does it mean that the more than 5 students were happy too? Not necessarily, right? Just like number 1, just like 2A. So no entailment relationship. So P doesn't entail Q there. And the last one, more than 5 students are over 30 years. More than 5 students are over 35 years. I mean, do they stand in a kind of entailing relationship? P entails Q or not? No, not necessarily, right? So in all of these, in 2A to 2C, P doesn't entail Q, okay? But Q entails P, right? So you can see that the relationship between P and Q or Q and P is that if P entails Q, P must be more informative than Q. Okay? This is kind of a conclusion that we can draw. If P entails Q, it means P must be more informative than Q. Okay? More informative meaning it includes the Q as part of it, right? So if it includes Q as part of it, then it's more informative, right? Like this. Another example. I own a black puppy, and I own a puppy. P entails Q or not? This one is easy. In every situation where I own a black puppy, I also own a puppy, right? Yes, so P entails Q. And I want to point out that here, If P entails Q, it means P must be more informative than Q. Because here, if you look at this, black puppy, what does it mean? It means black, that puppy has to be black, and it has to be a puppy, right? So it has like at least 2 pieces of information. So it's at least more informative than just puppy, okay? So that's the relationship of entailment, okay? So if you use, Venn diagram, like in mathematics, when you use like a circle to represent a set of things, right? So if you have, let's say, black puppy here, right? So all black puppies are in this kind of world, in this kind of circle, right? So then this is the relationship between the two. So this is entailment. Black puppy is contained, the world of black puppy here is contained within the world of puppy in general. Because in puppy in general, you might have white puppy, you might have red puppy, whatever. But at least you know that black puppy is contained there, right? So that's why we say that in every situation, when one is true, the other has to necessarily be true because it contains this kind of like two different worlds, and then one is within another, right? So this is the Q, and this is the P, right? So that's the kind of entailment relationship. Now, can you do number 1 and number 3, 4, 5, and 6? So can you do number 1? Again, we'll proceed with the same thing. Check whether the first sentence, let's suppose that it's always P, and the second sentence is Q. So we want to see if P entails Q or not. So let's start with number 1. Okay? So rectangle, it means a shape that has 4 angles, right? 4 corners like that. But it could have so many shapes, like this, like this, like this, and like this, right? But a square is a rectangle that has 4 equal sides. So now you can figure out. Okay, I think everyone is done. So let's look at maybe number 1. So number 1A, no student came to class, and no student came to class and had a good time. So does P entail Q or not? The first entail the second or not? It does entail it, right? No student came to class at all, right? In fact, no student came to class and had a good time. That sounds pretty bad, right? And if you use but, no student came to class, but no student came to class and had a good time, it sounds really bad, right? It is an entailment. It is an entailment. So no student came to class. In fact, right? Use that. In fact, no student came to class and had a good time. Right? What does it sound? It sounds weird or not? It sounds contradictory or not? It sounds redundant or not? No student came to class. In fact, no student came to class and had a good time. What do you think? Redundant or not redundant? It sounds redundant, right? Like this part especially, right? No student came to class, right? So in this case, it entails the second one. No? Okay, then let's look at number 3. Because number 1 has no. Let's look at number 3 first. Number 3 is this one. Every student came to class. Every student came to class early, and every student came to class. Does A entail B or P entail Q or not? The first entail the second or not? Entails or not entail? Every student came to class early. In fact, every student came to class. Sounds weird, right? And if you use but, it also sounds weird, right? So in this case, it entails it, okay? So P entails Q. And the second one, more than 5 students are over 35 years of age, and more than 5 students are over 30 years of age. P entails Q or not? Yes, right? Yes, because if you have more than 5 that are over 35, then you have more than 5 that are over 30, for sure, right? So it entails it in every situation, right? So it entails it. Next one, it has a no, so you have to be careful. No student came to class early. Does it mean that no student came to class? No, right? No, right? No student came to class early doesn't have to mean that no student came to class. They might come to class, but not early, right? Or early, we don't know. So no, the first doesn't entail the second. Number D, less than 5 students are over 35, and less than 5 students are over 30 years. 30 are over 30. So does P entail Q or not? No, no way, right? No way. So what do you see as, so now we can go back to number 1. So do you, but before that, can you see the relationship between the first 2 and the last 2? The relationship. The relationship between the first 2, if you look at, we say that in the first 2, there's an entailment relationship, right? You see that in the first 2, the first sentence, every student came to class early. You see that it's more restrictive than the second. You see that? It's more restrictive, right? So the more restrictive sentence always like entails the less restrictive sentence. Just like this, every student came to class and had a good time. Like it's more restrictive, meaning it's not just come to class, but it's also having a good time. So it's more restrictive that way. Okay? It has to be both, came to class, 1, and have a good time, 2. So it's more restrictive that way. And it will entail the less restrictive one. Okay? Especially when there is the word every. You see that? When there's the word every. Okay? So when you have the word every, VP1 versus every, and then you have VP2. If this is to entail the other one, VP1 has to be more restrictive, and the VP2 has to be less restrictive. Okay? Like that. For the word every. So that's for positive sentences. Okay? So that's the relationship between the first 2. And more than here is also positive. Okay? But if you compare that to this pair, no student came to class early, no student came to class, we agreed, right, that this doesn't entail the other one, right? The first doesn't entail the other. But you see that the pattern is the same. The first one is more restrictive than the second. But when you add the word no, the relationship is not it, right? So in this case, the opposite is true, okay? So when you have no, the relationship is upset, okay? In other words, when the sentence is negative, this relationship doesn't hold anymore. It's the other way around. Because the negative word upsets the relationship. So the negative word is like something that cancels out the relationship between more restrictive and less restrictive, like that. Okay? So if no, here, I am running out of space. So no, if you have no VP1 and no VP2, one will entail the other only if and only if, VP1 is less restrictive than VP2, which is more restrictive. The relationship is like the reverse of the first one. because it's just the relationship between positive sentences and negative sentences. Okay. So can we come back to look at number 1? No student came to class. No student came to class and had a good time. It entails it, right? Because of this kind of relationship, see? Less restrictive and more restrictive, right? And also imagine the world when nobody came to class at all, 0 people in the class. Then it cannot be possible that those 0 people, no one, will come to class and had a good time at the same time, right? Because nobody came, and how could they have a good time, right? So it entails it, right? Because you have 0 to start with. So in this case, it must be true, right? That nobody came and had a good time too, because nobody was there, right? So it entails it, right? So in this case, P entails Q, right? And the same goes for B. No student is over 30 years of age. Then no student is over 35, right? Of course, because nobody is over 30. How could there be one person that's over 35? No, right? So it entails it. And C and D, same thing. Less than 5 students came to class. Less than 5 students came to class and were happy. Same thing, right? Because less than 5 students came to class, then it must be true that less than 5 of them came to class and were happy, like that. So all of these, the P entails the Q in all of these. Okay? And you can see that there is a negative word here, no, and less than, like that. So in a negative sentence, the relationship is the opposite of the positive sentence. Okay? So far, so good? I know it's confusing, but if you go back and review, it will help. Because it involves, like, you know, thinking about possible worlds. Number 4, Seung Ryong will not come to class, maybe in the future, but he's here today. Seung Ryong will not both come to class and have a good time. You see the word not there? So it's negative, right? So in this case, does it entail it? Yes, it does, right? He will not come to class, so he will not be there. So how could he have a good time, right? How could he have a good time? No. So it entails it for this one. And for number 5, I'm not over 20 years. Does it mean I'm not over 30 years too? For sure, right? If I'm not 30 years, if I'm not over 20 years, how could I be in any possible case? How could I be over 30, right? If P is true, Q must always be true, for sure. So A entails B or P entails Q for these 2 sentences. Okay? For number 6, you have gone over these, right? For number 6. So number 6 to 6A and B, there's no negative, right? There's no negative word. So the kind of relationship that you have here will hold for positive sentences. Song-wook got savaged by a goldfish. Let's suppose that it's true. Savage meaning like attack, like that. Song-wook got savaged by an animal. Does it entail it? P. Sung-wook got savaged by a goldfish. Does it also mean that he got savaged by an animal? Yes, right? Yes, right? Because a goldfish includes the fact that it's an animal, right? Again, VP1 meaning VP of the P, is more restrictive, right? More restrictive meaning goldfish is fish plus animal plus small plus whatever, right? The composite thing. Right? So in this case, this still holds. Okay? Jun-hyuk climbed through a square hole, E, in the roof, and he climbed through a rectangular hole in the roof. So does A entail B or P entail Q or not? Yes, right? Again, more restrictive and less restrictive. The first one is more restrictive in the sense that a square means a rectangular shape plus all sides are equal. So it's more restrictive, it's more informative that way. So if he climbed through a square, then of course he will climb through a rectangular hole too, right? So A entails B, okay? P entails Q, in other words. Number C and number D, you see that there's the word not, so you have to be careful about the relationship. But in this case, you see that I switched the position of the two sentences too, in comparison to A and B. So Song-wook didn't get savaged by an animal, and Song-wook didn't get savaged by a goldfish. Does A entail B or not? Yes or no? In all possible worlds that he didn't get savaged by an animal, that's how I have it, right? In all possible way, when he didn't get savaged by an animal, it must be true that he didn't get savaged by a goldfish? Or not? True or not true? Yes, it's true, right? Because if he didn't get savaged by an animal, he must not have been savaged by the goldfish, because the goldfish is also an animal, right? If he didn't get savaged by any animal, right, then a goldfish must not be one of those animals, right? So it's true, meaning A entails B or P entails Q. In this case too, number D, Jun-hyuk didn't climb through a rectangular hole in the roof, and Jun-hyuk didn't climb through a square in the roof, right? Again, the entailment holds here. The first one entails the second one, right? If he didn't climb through a four side shape, then he must not be, in no situation will he climb through a square hole, for sure. So this one holds, okay? But you can see that I kind of switched the relationship, switch the position of the two sentences in comparison to A and B. That's why you see that in all of these there's an entailment. Okay? If I didn't switch, then you wouldn't see the entailment for the negative sentences here. We still have 5 minutes. Can you do number 7? And then I'll just have you do 8 and 9 at home, and we'll do 7 here. Let's spend 2 minutes on number 7. 7A and B. So we'll do the same thing. Is A entail B or is P entail Q or not? I use P, Q, and AB interchangeably, okay? So when I said Gil-ho chew up all my popcorn, does it mean he chew up all my food? No, not necessarily, right? He might have finished up all my popcorn, but other kinds of food are still left, which is possible. So not necessarily, right? Doesn't entail. Now you will say, well, Krista, then this rule is wrong, because when we have a positive sentence, the more restrictive one should entail the less restrictive. Popcorn is a kind of food, right? Popcorn is food plus made from corn seeds and so on. So it's more restrictive. So why that relationship doesn't hold here? Well, because you have this weird guy doing here, which is the word all. When we have a quantifier, we say this is we call it quantifier, right? Quantifiers are words that have to do with like numbers, right? All, no, some, any, every, most, whatever. So when we have quantifiers, it might upset the kind of the general relationship that we have. Okay. Number B, Nam colored all the square shapes purple. So he colored all the square shapes purple. He made them all purples, all those that are square. Okay, meaning all those that have 4 sides, 4 equal sides. Does it mean that he colored all rectangular shapes purple? Does it mean that? Not necessarily, right? So A doesn't necessarily entail B, because as I say, rectangular could have square, could have this kind of rectangular shape, could have this parallel, and could have this. So if he only colored this kind of thing, square, in which all four sides are equal, purple, then what about the rest? No, not necessarily, because these are not squares, but they are rectangular shapes as well. But he only colored the square, right? So A doesn't entail B in this case. Okay? So we'll come back and talk about presupposition next time. And can you do number 8 and 9 at home?